It is time now to recognize WPC's 2016 Champion of Freedom Award recipient. This is big. As its name indicates, this award is given every year to a person, ladies and gentlemen, or people who have championed our ability to be free and celebrate that precious God-given right. And this year, the selection was certainly an easy one. Not only is he one of Washington's finest, he is one of our country's finest, General Jim Mattis. And not only will you have the opportunity and a fantastic chance to ask him a few questions by texting the number listed on the cards on your table. That number, 426-3680. 509, I should say. 509-426-3680. So you have a chance to ask the General your own question. To introduce the General, I have the honor to introduce State Senator Michael Baumgartner. Senator Baumgartner serves Washington's 6th Legislative District here in Spokane, a Harvard graduate. He once served as an economics officer at the U.S. Embassy in Iraq, working in the Office of Joint Strategic Planning and Assessment during the Iraq surge. He played a lead role in coordinating the economic services and political support for the Baghdad security plan. In his time in Olympia, Washington Policy Center has been honored to work with Senator Baumgartner to bring key small business and labor reforms to our state. Senator Baumgartner.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. What an honor it is for me to be here tonight. You know, over the summer, if you'd asked me the two people in life I'd most like to meet, I probably would have told you the Pope and James Mattis. And on most days, I wouldn't have known in what order. So this really is a big deal. Before I go any further, I also want to thank Washington Policy Center. You know, the way we save this republic of ours is one community, one state at a time. And the battle of ideas in this state, Washington Policy Center, is the howitzer. So tonight, we're loading the howitzer. And thank you for what you're doing with your donations. I also just want to indulge me just a second just to acknowledge my wife, Eleanor. If you'll wave your hand over there, Ellie. As many of you know, Eleanor and I met in Helmand Province on a counter-narcotics team. We now have 4 little kids. The oldest is 5 and the youngest is 1. And as I say, there's no better preparation for Olympia than having 4 kids in diapers at the same time. But Eleanor allows me to do what I do. She also, I haven't written a speech down in 5 years, but she insisted I write this one down because I can't mess it up because Mattis is a big deal. So here we go. James Mattis is one of our own. He's a son of Eastern Washington. He was born down the road in Pullman, birthplace of not just great generals, but great state senators as well. He graduated high school in Richland before earning a degree in history from Central Washington University. James Mattis is a defender of our freedoms. After receiving his commission in 1972, he served more than 40 years in the United States Marine Corps, eventually rising to the rank of 4-star general. He has many, many notable commands. I'll just mention that they include looting one of the first battalions into Kuwait in the first Gulf War, helping liberate Kandahar from the Taliban in Afghanistan, commanding the assault on Fallujah in Iraq in 2004, and eventually replacing David Petraeus as head of Central Command with oversight of both Iraq and Afghanistan. It's a big deal. James Mattis is a scholar and an intellectual. His reservoir of knowledge and personal reading library is legendary amongst the Marine Corps. Mattis is often referred to as the warrior monk and was noted to carry a copy of the Meditation of Marcus Aurelius throughout his career. If you're looking for good questions to ask when you text in tonight, ask him about book recommendations. Today, he serves on several distinguished boards and is a member of the Hoover Institute at Stanford University. James Mattis has been on the front lines of the fight against Islamic terrorism for decades. His deployment commands have taken him across the Middle East. From Beirut to Baghdad to Kabul, Mattis has dealt with Iranian-backed terrorists like Hezbollah and Jaish al-Mahdi and Sunni extremists like al-Qaeda, ISIS, and the Taliban. His insights in how to defeat these threats are needed today now more than ever. And through all his career, James Mattis has been a patriot and inspiration not just to the men and women of the Marine Corps, but to our entire nation. James Mattis quotes are legendary and frequently requoted by the Marines who love him. If you want a good homework assignment tonight and you're feeling bad at work tomorrow, Google search James Mattis quotes and you will get fired up, let me tell you. And I'm going to enclose this introduction by reading from a letter that he sent to the members of the 1st Marine Division as they prepared to enter battle on the eve of the invasion of Iraq. So take a moment and think about everybody here and picture yourself getting ready to go into battle with this guy leading you, and this is the end of his letter that he sent. You are part of the world's most feared and trusted force. Engage your brain before you engage your weapon. Share your courage with each other and as we enter the uncertain north of the line of departure. Keep faith in your comrades on your left and right and Marine air overhead. Fight with a happy heart and a strong spirit. For the mission's sake and our country's sake and the sake of the men and women who have carried the division colors in the past battles, who for life and never lost their nerve, carry out your mission and keep your honor clean. Demonstrate to the world that there is no better friend and no worse enemy, the United States Marine. Ladies and gentlemen, please get on your feet and join me in giving James Mattis Washington Poly Center's Hero of Freedom Award. Thank you.
Thanks, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks, Senator, for the introduction. We share something, he and I. Like he mentioned, we were both born in Pullman. And so, you know, proud of that Washington connection. But I will thank you all. It's an honor to be here, especially an honor to be recognized in your home area, to come home after many years overseas and all, and be back among the people you're most comfortable with. And I would just tell you, too, ladies and gentlemen, in light of some of my published remarks, it's an honor to be invited, and it's a privilege to be invited back in any polite company to talk anytime, you know. So home is kind of the place they always take you in when no other place will. I would just tell you, too, that to the sponsors and the Washington Policy Center, having been stumbled into high rank in the military, you start working 7-day work weeks, and of course on the holidays you're on high alert because of what our erstwhile enemies are up to. You work in 16, 18 hours a day. Pretty soon your next original thought is your first. You're half numb as you go through these days, and I'm part of a think tank now where you have time to reflect. The words that were used earlier about using facts and calm, something that with social media today and the media today, you often have them generating one crisis after another. We need Washington Policy Center. We need think tanks to calmly look at things and consider them and bring forward good ideas, because I'll tell you, they aren't going to come out of a government that's left to its own devices. This is a democracy for a reason. I'm the warm-up act for Dr. Krauthammer. I've heard him before. I never go to one of his talks without pen and paper, because you're going to love this. This is a man who's very, very comfortable with his rigor, with the free competition of ideas. And he bears no ill will toward anyone. He'll listen to anyone. He'll meet them on their ground with those uncomfortable facts. And I think he's a wonderful role model for all of us. I'm very proud to be Eastern Washington born and bred. Just give you my bona fides: born in Pullman, grew up in Richland, went to college in Central Washington, went to jail in Ellensburg. I'm full thing, you know. But I would tell you that flying back into the Northwest from overseas, I'm still on Australia time right now, by the way, and seeing Mount Adams sticking up, or Mount Rainier, and see the Columbia River down below. Remembering the days in the Palouse country and camping in the Blue Mountains. I can't tell how many times I zipped myself into a sleeping bag saying, one of these days I'll be home again. And so I tell you, I salute this place. This is heaven on earth. I was raised there in Richland by the greatest generation, as we call them very fondly, who came home from World War II, looked around at a world where they'd lived through a depression, and they said, what a crummy world, 50, 60, 70 million dead. But they didn't then retreat into isolationism. They did not learn to despise one another. They created the United Nations. They created Bretton Woods, saying never again would there be no lender of last resort that would drive people to a demagogue like Hitler. The IMF and World Bank is what we call it. They created things like the Marshall Plan, hated enemies, and what did they do? They whipped them in war and then embraced them and brought them back into the embrace of the nation states of the world. And thank God they did, saying we're not going to have another injurious peace treaty like the First World War and create another war like that. And then sometimes you have to see your country through the eyes of foreigners. I'm sitting at the Australian ambassador to the United States in Washington, D.C. a few years ago in his backyard, just he and I, and he said, you know, America committed the single most self-sacrificial act in world history after World War II. And I'm thinking, was it the Marshall Plan, the UN, what was it? He said, after 2 world wars in 25 years, you could have said, we're through with you, Europe. We're not going through it again. We're going to use Latin America and Canada and the Pacific Ocean nations as our future. Europe, you're on your own. Instead, you committed 100 million dead Americans in a thermonuclear war to something called NATO. And they put it together, and NATO held the line and held the line and held the line until the internal rot basically took the Soviet Union down. And the first time NATO went to war was not when Europe was attacked, it was when America was attacked on 9/11. And it shows the wisdom when you can't even calculate what the future holds, because the foreseeable future is not foreseeable. They put something together that came to our aid, and I have never fought this enemy without other nations' soldiers at my side. So the greatest generation committed us to engaging in the world, not to retreating from it. They raised us well, and I would tell you that out of Eastern Washington, we stood the test. Matter of fact, the top diplomat of our era, Ryan Crocker, was born here in Spokane. He went to school in Whitman College down in Walla Walla. And let me tell you where this young man served during my time, and I spent a lot of time in the Middle East. Ambassador Ryan Crocker served in Lebanon, Qatar, Kuwait, Syria, Iraq, Pakistan, and Afghanistan. When he walks into the room, and any military men, women are in that room, soldier, sailor, airman, Coast Guardman, Marine, regardless of rank, we stand for an Eastern Washington lad for whom the State Department's award, annually given each year for expeditionary diplomacy, is the Ambassador Ryan Crocker Award. Your reputation lives on through your sons and daughters who go off and serve not only our nation but humanity. In 1969, frankly, motivated by the draft, I was not the smartest draft dodger. I joined the Marine Infantry. But I went in, and about 10 years later, 1979, for the first time I sailed into Mideast waters as an infantry company commander on board Navy amphibs. It was quite a year far from what I had learned in my carefree youth. In the Middle East, that's the year Khomeini came to power in Iran. Our diplomats were taken hostage. The Soviets invaded Afghanistan. Assad, the president of Egypt, signed a peace treaty with Israel that guaranteed his assassination 2 years later, and terrorism really took off. I would just tell you, too, that this terrorism threat that we face today, that we saw so recently in our own country, it grew swiftly from 2 fundamental roots. One of them was the Al-Qaeda route. You know them very well from the Sunni side. These are the ones who declared war on the United States in the mid-90s. They were very effective. They took out 2 of our embassies in East Africa. They blew up the USS Cole, refueling in a neutral port. They also, of course, took down the trade towers on their second attempt on 9/11 in New York City. Their leadership has been shredded up in the Afghan-Pakistan border area, but they have franchised out, and you know them now as Boko Haram in Africa, Al-Shabaab in East Africa, in the Horn of Africa, and of course, Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula, the group that is targeted on this city, on this country tonight. They're out of Yemen, and these are the ones who tried to bring the plane down over Detroit, the airliner over Detroit on Christmas a few years ago. So they remain a very tough enemy. ISIS, Al-Nusra Front, that's who they are today. And you may want them to go away, you may wish them away. They are not going away, is the bottom line. The second brand of terrorists, of course, is the Iranian brand of terrorists. And we have to remember this because they're the more enduring threat to us because Iran, a nation state, supports them. They declared war on us, by the way, in 1983. They blew up our embassy in Lebanon where a young diplomat by the name of Brian Crocker was wounded in the blast. They also took out the French paratrooper barracks and the U.S. Marine peacekeeper barracks there. And they have continued their mayhem all the way through these years. We have not touched them in our counterterrorism efforts. And they even got so bold as a couple years ago to try to kill the Saudi ambassador to Washington, D.C., 2 miles from the White House. We caught them red-handed. It was not done by a rogue outfit in Tehran. It was approved at the highest level. And but for one mistake, they would have pulled it off in Georgetown on a Saturday night at a crowded restaurant with a large truck bomb. We did nothing about it, and I would tell you that this state sponsor, Iran, has actually increased its tempo of terrorist operations across the Middle East over the last year. I would tell you that taken broadly, we are now, ladies and gentlemen, in an era of frequent skirmishing against this enemy. It's going to go on for many, many years, and what we saw, unfortunately, this last weekend will continue to happen. We are going to have to stay calm. We cannot declare war on each other or say if we're Republicans, it's because of Democrats in the White House, or we're Democrats, it's because of Republicans in the White House. We've got to pull together because our enemy cheers every time we go after our government when we're under attack. And we don't want to exaggerate the fight. I will tell you, ladies and gentlemen, when we got intelligence on an enemy and I sent the lads in after them, I never had any concern once we found them what was going to be the outcome. The ferocity, the skill, and the ethics of our troops in the close quarters battle always meant that we would win. The only question, the only concern I had was how much it was going to cost us. It's not a new issue, this terrorism, no matter how breathlessly reporters report it. The first time you find jihad in American presidential papers is in Thomas Jefferson's. And for any of you Marine veterans in the audience, that's where you got to the shores of Tripoli in your Marines hymn. We have to have no confusion about this going away. I've dealt with this enemy since '79. I don't patronize them. They're nothing to take out. They're dangerous. They're hard, but we can do it if we have the political will and the unity at home. We are the good guys. We are the good guys, ladies and gentlemen. We're not the perfect guys. The last perfect guy I read about died on a cross a long time ago, but we're pretty good at what we do. I'll give you an example. I had declared myself the undisputed king of Kandahar when we went into Afghanistan and we took it down after the 9/11 attack. And they came to me and said, we want to open the schools. I said, of course. They said, well, we want to open the girls' schools. And what had happened when we took it down, there was not a big fight. So the Taliban, there were still thousands of them in town walking around, sullen, stroking their beards, whatever they want to do. And I said, by all means, go ahead. And they said, well, we're a little concerned for trouble. I said, we have the technology to solve this. And Army Green Berets, Navy SEALs, and Marines with bandoliers across their chest, grenades hanging off them, with their automatic rifles stood on all the street corners first day of school. And these little kids came walking out of these muddy houses and all, with little girls with little white blouses on and plaid skirts down to their ankles and little headscarves. And the boys came walking out with their white shirts and their dark pants and their bare feet, a little backpack over their back, and they were so proud to be going to school, real school. And they walked down the street. The 8-year-olds over there, they knew who the good guys were. How many of you would have wanted your children walking by foreign soldiers dressed like that on the street corners? But they knew, and their children, 8 years old, knew who were the good guys. We're still trying to convince the New York Times what the 8-year-olds know, but we're working on it. And these lads, and I assure you that as we stand here tonight, your military is quite capable of taking it to them. Don't ever doubt this. Between our police forces here at home and our military overseas, this is not that tough. Their spirits are strong. I still remember walking up behind a squad. I'd heard there was trouble in a place called Ramadi where I was pulling into, so I went down until I found the fight. I went down an alleyway, came around the corner, and here were a bunch of Marines and sailors shooting down the street. It's just one of those worst things you've seen since a Texas barbecue, the enemy shooting back down the street. And I walked up, and in the illustrious 240-year history of the United States Marine Corps, I asked the young 20-year-old corporal in charge the most inane question any combat leader has ever been asked. I said, "Hey guys, what's going on?" And the corporal, convinced that some village somewhere had lost its duty idiot, dropped his rifle from his shoulder. I looked over his shoulder and said, "No problem, General. We're just taking the fun out of fundamentalism over here, okay?" And I bring this up because lads in a tough... I would just tell you that lads in a tough situation like that keep their sense of humor. That says a lot about their confidence in a country that has equipped them and trained them and given them comrades in arms, shipmates like they have. And the descendants of those who fought Bunker Hill and Shiloh and Iwo Jima, the Battle of the Bulge, Khe Sanh, we're not made of cotton candy, and you know it. You raise them out here. I'd also tell you that they're lads who would wrap tourniquets loosely around their upper legs when they went on patrol, so if their leg was blown off, they could snap it tight and save their own life. And when you have young men who do that sort of thing, you understand what a great country we have that's worth fighting for. I want to get to the questions here because that was my direction, but I would also say something to the veterans. You know, there is nothing more persuasive to the young troops today that they will face nothing worse in the world than what you faced that gives them confidence to go forward. I'll give you an example. I'm not just patronizing the veterans here, Army, Navy, Air Force, Coast Guard, Marine Corps. The night before the attack, the assault into Fallujah, I went down to see the assault battalions that would go in. It's midnight. It's time for generals to back off and get out of the way and leave it in the hands of the infantrymen. They're named that for a reason, infant soldier, young soldier, 18, 19, 20 years old, probably no more than a year, 2 years out of high school, under seasoned 21-year-old corporals and sergeants who've been through it before. And as I was falling back with my radio operators to get back to my vehicles about a mile away behind the line of departure, and the Marines were all stripped down to their combat gear, no blankets, no sleeping bags. It was very chilly, but I'm sure they were shivering from more than just the cold. As we went by, the enemy created a problem in one area, and I was behind the company that would attack before dawn to clean out the enemy outposts so the battalion could move into the city. And so I checked in with the corporal, and he said, "We'll take care of it." So we laid there for a while the Marines did. And then it got quiet, and we just stayed there for a minute, make sure it was okay to move. And I heard one of the young Marines, then we moved on, say, "Hey, Corporal, do you think Fallujah's going to be tough in the morning?" And we have ladies here, so I'm not going to quite quote the corporal, but basically what he said was, "Hush and get some rest. We took Iwo Jima. Fallujah won't be nothing." So I just tell you, ladies and gentlemen, for a young man that wasn't even born, in 1945 or 55 or 65 or 75, it shows what the reputation and what our veterans have passed down year by year by their naked events, by their naked example that keeps our boys going across the line of departure. America's got two fundamental powers. One of them is the power of inspiration, and one is the power of intimidation. And I was part of the power of intimidation. Not a Marine, a U.S. Marine, answerable to each one of you in this room for what we did or did not do. But the power of inspiration is probably the more powerful. Going out in the western Euphrates River Valley in Iraq one night, we pulled into an outpost, and at dawn, the Marine said, by the way, we caught a guy trying to lay an IED, an explosive, on the road you were coming in. I said, really? And they said, yeah, he's really quite a guy. He speaks English. I said, okay, bring him on in. I'd like to meet this fellow. And they brought him in, and he was a delightful guy. He could speak English. We cut his handcuffs off, give him a cigarette. If you can't kill him with a bullet, give him cancer. Gave him a cup of coffee, and he starts talking. I said, what are you doing this for? Why are you doing something this stupid? You're Sunni, we're Marines, you know we're the best friends you have out here. He said, oh, you're part of the Zionistic conspiracy. I said, oh, knock it off. I said, let's get you on your way here. If you're just going to talk ignorant, I don't have time for you. He said, no. He said, I know. He said, we actually need you right now. I said, yeah, you do. And so we talked for a little while about his family and everything, and he said, you're going to send me to Abu Ghraib, aren't you? I said, oh, yeah, you can wear an orange jumpsuit for a long time there, young man. And he said, do you think if I was a model prisoner general, could I immigrate to America? Now think about that. A man who is literally willing to put his life on the line. He's out there whistling with his wheelbarrow, his 2 artillery rounds, his battery, his detonator. He's digging a hole and looks up and finds 5 Marines with automatic rifles standing around smiling at him saying, hey, buddy, you're not going to get your 401k at this rate, you know? And he, even confronting an enemy general, the power of inspiration of all of you here tonight, of people who get together, concerned citizens, who say, this isn't up to people in Washington. I've got to vote in this too. I get to say something. We get to have organizations that, independent of the government, can say you're right or you're wrong or here's a better idea. And that inspiration reaches all the way down to a guy who literally was trying to kill us. I would just tell you, ladies and gentlemen, that if we keep the faith, if we keep the inspiration going, if we remember what was said in that beautiful blessing tonight about come together, I think if I remember right, hearing it right, if we can rediscover the fundamental friendliness between ourselves as Americans who can disagree and argue and still have a beer or a root beer together afterwards, if we can somehow come back together with the unity, there is nothing that can stop us. And we should have the kind of arguments and policy discussions, but not forget that our neighbor is not just a Republican or a Democrat, whatever is opposite us. He's the guy trying to get his daughter into college. He's the guy with a son with MS. We got to keep the humanity among us. We cannot lose that. And for you young people, we need you to roll up your sleeves and don't wait till you have my color hair and start pitching in. You've got to pitch in. I would just tell you that this country, ladies and gentlemen, it's worth every ounce of love you can give it, and it's worth every ounce of commitment you can give it. So now I got to stop so I can take your questions. We've got, I know, Dr. Krauthammer shortly.
And I think that we're not going to have time for too many questions, but we don't. I didn't want to stop you. You're so inspirational. One of the questions that we did get is our military getting the quality recruits it needs to be effective in the 21st century?
Ladies and gentlemen, 71% of our 18-year-old males, this is the only thing I have data on, cannot qualify to enlist as a private in the U.S. Army. 71%. The ones we do have in, the young men and women, are magnificent. They're selfless to a point that I'm not even articulate enough to explain it. Their spirits are good, so what we're getting in is good, but our military is so shrunken right now that we're able to make it even if 71% are too overweight, have been on too many prescription drugs or illegal drugs, or have something else wrong with them. So we've got a problem, ladies and gentlemen, but right now the ones who are in can hold the line.
What was your most challenging situation that you faced as director of CENTCOM?
As the commander of CENTCOM, ladies and gentlemen, every morning I woke up with 3 primary questions or focus areas: Iran, Iran, and Iran. but I will tell you that once we get our policy straight, we can hold the line against them if we remember to take our own side in the fight. It is your Navy. Remember back 4, 5, 6 years ago, you remember hearing how Iran wanted to mine the Straits of Hormuz, put mines in the water? Remember those days? They're always talking about it. How many times have you heard it lately? 0. I called my fleet commander about 4 years ago, and I said, I want you to do an anti-mine exercise, an international anti-mine exercise, not an anti-Iran exercise, anti-mine. And I thought we'd get the usual suspects. You know, France and Britain would be there, Norway, Italy. We'd get United Arab Emirates, Kuwait, maybe Bahrain. Instead, 29 nations showed up. Canada, Estonia, Singapore, Djibouti, Japan, I can go on. I had every continent except Antarctica, and I was looking for a penguin, you know? But Iran shut down all that talk and all those threats because they realized what they were doing was they were creating an international coalition against themselves. But only your Navy, only the U.S. Navy, only the Fifth Fleet was sufficiently trusted and had the capability to buy peace for one more week, one more month, one more year, while the diplomats tried to prevent another war in this world that doesn't need another war. You should be very proud of your Navy. It's out there all the time, and yet you very seldom hear about them when they're successful.
And we have time for just one more.
Okay, one more.
One more. These are hard. There's some great questions here. When will our troops leave Afghanistan?
You know, ladies and gentlemen, leaving Afghanistan, you can want a war over, you can declare that war over, but the enemy, as we say in the military, gets a vote. I don't think any of you want to go back to 9/12/2001, as you heard not one airplane taking off from an airport out here in Spokane, to what it felt like to have 3,000 innocent people from 91 countries murdered in our country. And frankly, we knew it was coming. We didn't know how it was coming. Everybody was scrambling. I feel guilty every time I hear someone say, thank you for your service, General. We should never have allowed them to get through. It was our failure that cost those innocent people their lives. We cannot leave Afghanistan. We are going to have to stay there. Look at our troops still in Germany and Japan and Korea. If we will simply continue to commit to that stationing of our troops there, the enemy can't take it back over. They can't use it to attack us again. Our casualties will go down as we continue to train the Afghans. But to constantly say we're pulling out, only gives the Taliban courage, makes them feel like hopeful that they can pull it off, and men and women live by hope in this world. We don't want them to have any hope. We want them to know no better friend, the United States, and no worse enemy. You screw with us, you've had it. Thanks very much, ladies and gentlemen.
Wow. Fantastic. Thank you, General. And I did Google the General because I wanted to see some of those quotes. My favorite site that I came across was Badass Quotes from General Mattis. So you must check them out.